Welcome to the Collective Scope podcast, where we talk to great leaders who are influencing the next generation. Hey everybody, welcome to the Collective Scope podcast. We're so excited to have Eli Bonilla with us today. He's the National Millennial Director for National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. He's also the English pastor at Abundant Life Church of God in San Antonio, Texas. He's the husband to Alexis and now the father of Nova Lee, and also a Lee University alum. And so, man, we are really excited to have you on the show. And your name is just kind of blowing up right now. So we just had to, hey, we got to get him on the show, man. He's
literally,
blowing
Rob,
up.
I can't tell you. As soon as we booked him, 6 people said, "Do you know Eli Bonilla?" And I was like, "No, but I will soon." So your name is making the circles with people here on campus and around the world, really, people we talk to. So you could say we're fired up, maybe.
We are fired up, I think. So anyway, man, hey, welcome to the show, bro. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you for having me on. It's a privilege to be on y'all's podcast. This is awesome. You have a great setup there, by the way.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's credit to the production team here, Jeff Salyer and his team, and what they do here at Lee. So shout out to them as well, because they've done a great job for us. So Eli, man, tell me about this role that you have, because it's such a unique title in terms of a job description, the National Millennial Director. What's that all about, man?
It's very interesting. And just to kind of give a background of the NHCOC and the branch that I run, it's under the leadership of Reverend Samuel Rodriguez, and basically our goal is to kind of unite 2 different streams: the vertical stream of Billy Graham and the horizontal stream of Martin Luther King Jr., where we believe that the next movement in this nation needs to be the marrying of the 2, where there's a push on evangelism in all the places of influence in the United States, but also how are we doing that practically, relationally, across the board. And so I lead the millennial branch of that. And it's fairly new. It's very grassroots. Kind of the way that I'm going about it is smaller regional gatherings, just meeting with people, bringing influencers together in different regions. So we're going to do our Texas regional gathering in September. And I was invited on by Reverend Sam Rodriguez. And it's been an interesting ride. There's not many parameters. It's kind of just like however you can do it. And so I've just been calling friends. Friends have been calling friends. And that's how we've started organically. And so, we're trying to lead this next generation into the future. And I've been tasked to do so.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. So as a millennial director, then obviously you're kind of leading your peers, right? So how has that been for you, sort of reaching out to the same people, same age, and really connecting with them? What's it like to lead your peers?
I've noticed that you cannot lead without relationship, especially peer-to-peer. And so most of the influence that I have is not necessarily up-down influence. It's lateral influence. It's influence that I have relationally. So it's not that I come with my title necessarily and say, hey, this is who I represent. This is how many churches we represent, kind of power moves. It's more of friendships. I start with the base of friendships and kind of allow it to grow from there, because it is finicky, especially if you try to come authoritative.
Right.
It's like, hey, man, who are you? Like, I know, it's kind of like, I know who Sam Rodriguez is, and I've heard of him, but who are you? And so that's kind of, it's relational, definitely.
Very cool.
It's kind of unique because you are a millennial to be in this role. Just in general, are you finding it that millennials are getting involved quicker into leadership, or is it still something we're dragging behind in the church in?
Yeah, definitely, especially my role, my title, because the Millennial Network, technically I'm networking millennial pastors. And so I'm in kind of this broad range from associate, executive, campus, and lead pastors that are in the millennial demographic between the ages of about 24 to later years like 38, even into 40. And what we're finding out is that it is a small demographic. It's a small pool. And I'm talking more obviously from the Hispanic angle
Mm.
in the United States, where there is not a big pool. And so even Reverend Sam told me, he's like, "Hey, look, I'm tasking you with this. This is going to be a tough task because there's not much known." And I'm my assumption, and actually, just jumping into this, is because there's not many there's not much transitioning happening. And so when I try to tap and say, "Do you have an associate pastor that's within this age range?" It's like, maybe I can find you one, not in my city, but I got a city near us that, it's a lot of stretching and pulling to be like, I might know a guy.
Yeah.
Instead of, okay, right away I have 5 off the top of my head. It's pretty rare.
So speaking from maybe just the Hispanic area, but maybe you can speak more broadly, is it that millennials aren't following the calling, or are they just not getting plugged into leadership?
I think that it's a little bit of both. I don't think that you could just say that it's one or the other. I know that there is a large pool that are willing, but there's not the space for them to operate. And so that's a big thing, and especially when you talk about, and not just denominations, but I think church structures worldwide, and we're finding out even through Empowered 21, that was one of the discussions that we have, is how the next generation is stepping into leadership, and just the lack of space that there is by far and large. I mean, there's certain situations where they can step in, but more often than not, there's not that space. And so I would say the dominant is that there isn't that space to be empowered, and empowered in a way where they get the opportunity to be led and have an opportunity to mess up in that empowerment, because there's also that crushing of pressure. And so it perhaps it's the fathering angle, where they're being led as sons and daughters, and we're missing a lot of that. And so not just the space, but they're not following the calling because they're not being fathered or parented into it, with the parameters and kind of the safety nets of a true relationship with somebody that's over them. So I believe it's a little bit of both.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think it seems to be more of a systemic problem even across cultures. I mean, perhaps you're seeing it more clearly in your culture, the Hispanic culture, where you're primarily focused. But I think even just in the church in general, we've kind of lost that modeling, fathering, shepherding, raising up sons and daughters kind of mentality to lead well and to lead currently, right? So in your mind and your idea, then, what are some very practical things that you're doing or other people are doing, maybe to help to start changing that tide, to start changing that conversation?
Yeah. I kind of broke it down into just 3, and obviously these you could probably make more from these, but the 3 things that I think are necessary in order for the next generation to kind of step in is 3 words: space, voice, and power. And those are the 3 things that I've and I didn't make them up myself. I kind of actually got them. I was a part of an initiative called the DeVos Urban Initiative. And within that, they kind of broke that down for how are we creating space for the youth in our church and the young people in our church. But I feel like that's the same way for the next generation to step into leadership, is just a space for them to occupy, to be invited a seat at the table, if you will, but not stopping there, giving them a voice to kind of discuss point of view, perspective, and to kind of give input and insight. And then lastly, to empower them, to give them the power to help, because we believe that there's a lot of talent, potential, leadership already within this generation, to not just speak on certain topics, but to move obstacles out of the way for the generations that have come before and the generations to come. And so I believe that all 3 of those work in tandem. And I think my father and Reverend Sam have done a good job in terms of allowing me to have that space to operate, the space to mess up, and then the power to do so. So he's not breathing down my neck saying, are you doing these gatherings this way, or have you talked to this person? He's kind of saying, hey, here are your parameters. I believe in you, and go for it. And then the same thing with pastor here. He gives me the parameters for our services, but then he says, hey, you have the freedom to kind of do evaluations on your own. And if this is working for the English better than it's working for the Spanish, then full steam ahead in the English. And so I kind of have those three at my disposal now, but I know that could help our generation right now.
Listen, I think space is a critical component of that, and I think it's important. What's interesting about the culture we sit in, Ellie, is that it feels like, and I use the word feel kind of as a broad term, but anybody with enough voice or clout can have voice, especially on social media.
Right.
And I know you're a proponent of social media. How does the social media impact and having voice there maybe translate over to having voice outside of that setting? As we would say, in real life.
Yeah. We are living, and I heard it coined, we're living in the greatest communication shift in the last 500 years.
Wow.
It just changed so widely. And to give you kind of a little perspective looking into kind of what is possible now, when you look at whenever Martin Luther did his Reformation, the 99 Thesis on the door, that was on top of the initiation of the printing press.
Right.
And evolution of that type of form of communication, which was unprecedented at the time. And the power was in the print. And so you had Catholicism really kind of holding on to that, and Martin Luther comes up, and he's able to, instead of taking all of this time, he can print these little pamphlets, and he's handing out these pamphlets, and they're printing them out, and he was a master communicator through that medium. And so now we're seeing another almost reformation per se in the Christian church, where like you said, you could have influence and clout by the amount of followers you have, and automatically if there's not space being created for you, you create your own space.
Right.
And so, I believe what we're talking about is not necessarily the next generation rising up as a revolution and saying, well, if there's not space, we're going to do our own thing. But if there's not a transition, if there's not space being created, there are already the tools that we have to our disposal to create our own space. And so you're seeing that as well. And so you're seeing little bits of reformations happening around because there's not, the traditional space is not being created for them to enter into. And so now you have social media, and a good friend of mine, I'm sure you know him, Noah Heron, he's out here 20,000+ followers, and he's able to engage at a high level. And I have several friends that are kind of in that upper echelon of social media outlet where they can just, really influence at a high capacity everywhere, all over the world, worldwide, instantaneously. And so that big shift is definitely something to keep your eye on. If the space is not being created here, space will be created somewhere else, whether that's by the person or by someone else.
But I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the church, is that I think God created it to be revolutionary, not to be religion. Right. So we get trapped in our own traditions, we get trapped in our own institutionalization, right? And then out of necessity, it's like the Spirit of God just refuses to be contained. And so the church is kind of reimagined, reborn, reformed, right? The Reformation. I love that analogy that you use, like a digital Reformation. And that's something that Jeff and I have talked about quite a bit. We've talked a lot about digital discipleship. We've talked a lot about digital church and what that means for this coming era. We don't have all the answers, but we're having the conversation. So I think it's really cool that you would point that out. And so, that's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast, is because we want to tap into that with dudes like you and get the voice out there. So I love what you're saying about social media, and I love how you're kind of using that as a medium to actually impact people's lives. And so I guess my next question would be then, what kind of tension are you really facing when it comes to sort of evolving with your voice and with your culture? What kind of pushback are you getting from this stuff?
Are you talking in terms of just
just in general? Just in general.
Yeah, tradition and religion is such a heavy thing, and it is what was tradition for what was brand new and revolutionary for one generation becomes tradition and religion for another. And so I think the release of those things, it's really hard. And so whenever you try to propose online church and titles like online pastors, like
Right.
my wife, she sits kind of in a position where she operates in that type of way, like an online pastor, where and don't mind me just kind of going in, because like you said, I don't think many of us have this kind of figured out in terms of virtual church, but where we're even discussing like, hey, we have the most engagement online. Our biggest congregation is online right now. Like, we're reaching almost 20,000 people online every
Wow.
6 days with our church. And so that's way more than what we're getting in the
Right.
doors. We're having discussions on like, what are we doing to engage virtually so that we can become a bridge from the virtual to the real world? What are we doing online that is bridging people to ask questions, or even to get to a point where I'm enjoying this so much, I need to get myself through the door of the thing I'm enjoying here online. And so kind of the pushback is, where is the line on how much you're willing to go online and spend there? Are we willing to spend money online?
Yeah.
Are we willing to promote posts? Is that a good use of the church budget? Right. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we're fighting about in the office. That's definitely a discussion. But there is pushback that's like, no, we're not going to use that.
Right.
We're not going to the funds of the church to promote an Instagram post. And yet we don't have young people showing up because we're not where the young people are.
Right.
And fortunately for us, it's not going to go back to what it was. It's going to continue to progress. I don't believe that even Instagram is the final form of the social media revolution. No, this is another stepping stone to something even more foreign if we're not willing to engage with it. So the pushback is change. I think that's the pushback for every generation, is what's new and upcoming, and the fear of what change brings, and the fear of what not knowing it. And my generation knowing technology more, but not as much as Z.
Right.
And then the Xers and boomers kind of like, do we want to mess with that? That's something we're not comfortable with, or who are we reaching out? And so I think that the pushback is the change and the unfamiliarity, not necessarily that it's evil. I think that people just broad stroke it with, it's no good. It's just because a lack of understanding. And so that's the most we're getting.
So Ellie, in those conversations, whether they be in your office or just other people in general, how are you clearly communicating, especially in the social virtual platform, that there's value in this, that it's important? It's as important as the conversations in the 90s as the carpet color was, or maybe more so, How are you clearly communicating that to people like Rob and I, who are Xers or the boomers that you're working with?
Mm-hmm. We definitely come with numbers. That it's not theory. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we could get caught up in the theory, like, well, everyone, because I think my heart is just wanting to explode with like, well, because that's just the thing to do, but that's not how you speak in terms of the language of the boomer and even the Xer. It's analytics, it's numbers, it's well, who are we reaching? And thank God for Facebook. They give you the built-in analytics. You have that also on business accounts on Instagram, and with the new creator accounts coming out for Instagram, you could even dive deeper into those analytics. So you're able to, by the numbers, who's tuning in, how many men, how many women, what countries are they from, what languages do they speak? And we've already had tangible testimonies of people that found us online. And they'll come through the doors and they'll be in our connect room, and we'll be talking with them. How did you find out? Well, this post was shared and I saw it and I heard the message. And so these testimonies are starting to come out. And so the first one is numbers. And then the second, I think they're in tandem. I don't think that it's one bigger than the other, is the stories of the testimonies of people getting plugged in through online. Man, there's so many young adults that are coming to our church because of that someone shared a clip. We're trying to make them in bite-sized 60-second clips and putting them out there, and it just resonates. And they're like, man, where was this? And they're like, oh, this is my church. What? That's a church? Yeah, you should come check it out. And automatically you see that what you're sowing in on the internet is you're being reaped in person with actual people and numbers. And so, numbers and then the testimonies.
Amen.
I think, Rob, you and I grew up in a church time when we'd have testimony time. Did you have that growing up?
Well, I didn't go to church growing up. So.
Well, when you guys go to, we had testimony time, right? And so the pastor would say, "Does anybody got a testimony?" And sure enough, like somebody's grandma would get up and testify about her knee feeling better or whatever. And I think, Ellie, what you're saying, and we can agree on this, is social media is becoming that space for testimonies now, where we would have it in the Sunday service. Now it seems like that's happening online, and rather than just testifying to the saints, they're sort of reaching everybody. Right. And that's the impact you seem to be sharing through the stories, is what we call testimony time, is really just a shared post at this point.
Yeah.
And it seems to be making a bigger impact than just grandma's healed knee. So that's incredible. What do you see going forward, Ellie, with social media or online church? How are you guys thinking ahead of the curve?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I guess you can get 1,000 answers from that question. You know what? Honestly, we see virtual church not as a solution for the physical church, or a replacement. Better said, that it doesn't replace it, but it is It could be a first step for somebody, for a lot of people. That we want them to have an opportunity to step into the four walls of the church and to be connected with an actual congregation and relationship. And so I see that persisting, but honestly, I also see that if we're not careful and we kind of put all our eggs in the basket of social media and virtual world, that once the new thing comes out, or kind of moving on with that, if there's not a groundedness, if we're not being strategic with bridging virtual to reality, then we run the risk of putting our eggs in a basket that's just going to change next year. Right. And so what we look into is, okay, we're using these as tools. This is not, we could call it virtual church, but we know it's not a church. We'll use it for the language, for the sake of the language. Like, hey, if you're traveling, you can log into your virtual church, but it is not a replacement for church. So the way we're looking in the future is that whatever tools are given to us in the future, whatever that is, if that is eventually VR and we're just jumping in, people are putting on headsets, whatever, to do discipleship. I don't know. Who knows? The sky's the limit on what technology can be. But what we're looking at is, this will never replace the church. It'll just become tools for people to walk into the four walls of a church and to experience Jesus in community. And that's the end goal. So no matter how fancy it gets or what names it has, that's the way that we're looking into the future for it, making it tools.
So as you guys are bridging sort of this virtual versus real sort of conversation, and it's a real conversation. I dream of the day where I can see a holographic preacher on stage and, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe we can bring back a retro Billy Graham or something in holographic form. I think it'll be legit. Anyway, I digress. But anyway, so as you guys are kind of building these bridges, certainly in our culture, it's estimated that about 35 to 38% of incoming freshmen have some kind of diagnosable mental illness. And so some of the negative effects that we're seeing with social media are the isolation and the loneliness, the comparison factor, FOMO, all of those kinds of things, right, that come with sort of with any really revolutionary tool. There are side effects, right? So as your generation, millennials and Gen Zs especially, as we kind of start really seeing Gen Zs enter the college realm, we're dealing with a lot of loneliness. We're dealing with a lot of hurt. And so I totally agree, social media as an on-ramp, kind of that language to to a real relationship in church. So how are you guys beginning to untangle some of those deep-seated sort of loneliness issues, mental health issues that come with sort of this paradigm of reaching out?
Yeah, we're definitely a church of small groups. We're very intentional because we're a larger church, and we definitely want to be a church that is intentional about that one-on-one conversations, and then also creating spaces for the kids to become friends with one another here at church. And so the one thing that we've implemented are connect nights where they're not spiritual. We just go out and we bowl together. We go to a trampoline park together. We go to the park together. Because that's something that we also notice is that it's even different than when I was in high school, and I was only in high school about 10 years ago. It just, these social dynamics are completely different. It is
Right.
actually shocking to me. It's foreign to me how all of these kids can be in one room and be to themselves. Man, I remember, it was just a battle for attention. If you got a bunch of teenagers in a room, it's that the alpha dogs would get up and battle for the attention of the room. And now there's not even a fight for the attention of the room. It's just like everyone's siloed off with, and maybe the interactions will be leaning over like, have you seen this video?
Right.
And we try to create spaces for them to go out, to be active with one another, and to develop those friendships. And that's kind of how we're battling it practically. And we're seeing great relationships form. And the deeper the relationships, the less likely then they're jumping on their phones. Like the more that they're in community with one another. And so that's a little bit of what we're doing to battle that. And we're seeing that little by little. Like we have not solved that. We haven't seen like, 90% of our kids are not, falling into the statistics. But what we are seeing is, as we've started these events or these gatherings, we've seen a little bit more. Hey, they're talking more, they're interacting more, they're becoming more relational, and even more so with our leaders when they go and they have fun with the kids. And so that's how we're battling the isolation factor. And the more people that you have kind of in your inner circle of community, the less likely you can isolate yourself or fall into a place by yourself.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the challenge. We've sort of talked today about the rise and change of social media, and we talked now about the downside of that. And just really briefly, you mentioned some social media sort of influencers. How does someone who's creating space on social media, have a big platform, sort of fight the danger of making it about them?
Oh man. I feel that it's understanding what social media is for, and I think that what I don't want to do is say that I use my personal account for just reaching out. You know what I mean? Like I love posting about my daughter, my wife. If you get on my posts, it's not just me preaching, like at people. It's a lot of, what we're doing. I'm not pretending that everything is okay. I think that it's just us being able to define social media better. That will help people's anxiety. Continually telling people, hey, of course, I'm not going to post like having a bad day, because that's just not, that's not what social media is for. And so the understanding that like, hey, if I'm seeing the best of everybody, and understanding that that's fine. Like I want to be able to, like you said, if we turn it into for example, if we turn it into a platform of testimonies, then we run another risk that God's not doing miracles for me because I'm seeing the highlight of everybody's miracles and testimonies. You get what I'm saying? Like, but if we find like this is a place where we testify that God is good, then I'm more inspired instead of comparing myself to, oh man, I wish. It's more inspiration than comparison at that point. And so I think that vanity obviously can lean to vanity quickly. But then I also believe that there are people that, hey, it's my Instagram page and you're going to see me a lot, and you're going to see my daughter a lot, and you're going to see my ministry a lot. And if you press the follow button, you will continue to see those things. And so I really do believe it's continuing to define social media for a generation, getting that across, because at the end of the day, I don't even think that we can dictate how people will perceive us, even if we have the purest of intentions when we post.
Yeah.
That's
I don't think it's that we are fighting a new demon per se, right? I mean, this goes back a ways, people edifying themselves, right? And building themselves up or whatever. Pretty sure that's in the Bible somewhere. So, right? Yeah. So there's not necessarily a new demon that we're fighting. I think it's just the magnitude. It's the scale in which it actually infiltrates people's homes and people's lives. It's the consumption. It's the amount. It's the weightiness. And I think that's probably what has some people either skittish about social media and the power that it could be, and the reality that there is actually some very damaging things that exist on social media, right? So it's not new. I think it's just the size and the breadth and the accessibility and the consumption of social media that is really, really challenging for maybe some older folks like Jeff and I who are stuck in the 80s, right? So
we 80s are making a comeback. Let's be honest about that.
80s are, bro, we passed the 80s comeback. We're into the 90s comeback, man. I'm seeing tight rolled jeans and stuff like that. I did that in the 90s, dude. I mean, whatever. Okay, so these are not new challenges, but at the same time, I think if we kind of go back to maybe an earlier conversation, the social media platforms that you and others and that we have, I mean, this genuinely could be, and I love this idea that you're throwing out there, this digital reformation, sort of this new reformation of the church, this powerful force that can be used to actually change the world for Christ through a digital platform. And I love that idea. So that being said, how can we actually begin to take these tools and use them in a setting that is beneficial and safe, maybe even at the local church context, where a lot of pastors or pastoral leaders or churches just are not comfortable yet? How can we introduce them to a good side of social media?
Yeah, I believe that it's the concept of a sowing seed everywhere. You know, you don't want to misuse your seed, and I think that God has entrusted us with, social media for this generation, and all of us that are living right now during this era. And so I would always bring it back to biblical principles. And I think the principle of sowing is so important, especially when we talk about social media. It's what are we sowing into where the people are, and so that would be the beginning of the on-ramps, and it would be very simple. I don't think that people need to automatically, like, if your church does not have the capability to be Facebook Live during services, or you just don't have what you believe is the equipment. The truth is, like, you can give encouragement wherever you go. You can testify Jesus everywhere you go and whatever you post. And so, so many tools. Like, you could just, for example, just using the YouVersion app.
Right.
With the YouVersion app, you have the capability of doing anything on social media with the Word of God and planning the Word of God. And if you want to do a daily scripture, and you want to post it, they make the graphics there for you. And if you're not okay with, like, well, I don't want to put my face, or I don't want to promote anything the church is doing, hey, you can promote the Word of God. You can promote the Bible, simple little things like that. If we don't want to jump into the celebrity Christianity and, like, oh, well, I don't want it to seem vain. Okay, well, then let's keep it simple. We'll start with the Word. I can post the Word and it'll show up on someone's feed, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, that those little seeds that we're sowing, and perhaps just starting there and just allowing those seeds to increase as the Lord wills it, and perhaps God then proving that the seed is still good and that the ground of people's hearts are still good, whether virtually or in person, that you can still impact people's lives that way.
amazing.
I think Ellie brought something up earlier that would tie back to this, is that idea of space. Rob, you and I are Xers. We are not social media experts. We're semi-savvy, we may say, but I think that's a great space for millennials and Gen Zs maybe to step into with an Xer boomer pastor or a millennial pastor who doesn't understand it, to link arms in that. Because I think what we see, listen, my kids, they know it better than anybody. Like they can snap, gram, whatever. They don't Facebook. That's for grandma.
Yeah,
but I think, especially in the terms of space and leadership in the church, it's a great space for younger leaders to step into and go, hey, let me coach you. We had somebody on the show earlier talk about reverse mentoring, Ellie.
Yeah.
What's something that millennials and Zs, how could they reverse mentor us, maybe in some of that social media language?
Oh, wow. I think that sometimes it's just as good as sitting down and showing you your phone and the potential of your phone, you know? I would say that even Z is better than millennials. I heard a man by the name of Jason Dorsey. He talks about Z and millennials in the workspace all the time. And millennials, we're actually more technological dependent than we are savvy. Z is more savvy than even us. I have younger cousins that they show me things on my iPhone that I'm like, oh man, they're like, why are you doing it the long way? Here's the shortcut. And I'm like, what? I thought I knew my phone. And you know, as simple as the capabilities and truthfully, the way that we do it here at our church is, you know, once again, the space that pastor just allows me to sit down with him and show him Facebook and what it can do.
That's cool.
Show YouTube and what it can do. And it's just, and honestly, it's just the willingness to have a conversation on both sides, where the older generation is just willing to learn something that they're not as familiar with, and then the younger generation willing to teach. And so it's almost pulling from, like you said, it's reverse mentoring. You're pulling mentorship from the younger and then teaching old dogs new tricks. And so it's just counter what we've developed as we will always be the teachers to the younger. But like you say, man, it's unprecedented what we're going through right now, where a 10-year-old will know what to do with your phone better than you could ever, right? And so being willing to see that and having, going back to the conversation point, sitting down and having conversations about the tools that are in our hands, because regardless, we all have the same tool. Whether or not we're able to use it at its highest capability, I think it's dependent on what we know about it. And Z has the upper hand, and perhaps Xers, boomers, and even millennials can even learn from this younger generation.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Rob, I don't know. Like, it's interesting, and Ellie, maybe you've already put this together, but there's a couple things you're saying, and that we're engaging in conversation, and it always seemed like knowledge used to go one way. Like you talked about fathering, and so I've had mentors in my life who are pouring into me, but it seems like we're in a time and space where knowledge goes both ways. That fathers need to pour into spiritual sons and daughters, and spiritual mothers into sons and daughters. But those sons and daughters are pouring back into us in ways that is helping the whole body grow. For both sides are willing to learn and grow, I feel like we're in this great space or great time space where the body can benefit from those around us. It's not just a one-way conversation about mentoring or discipleship anymore.
Right.
And so that's great. And listen, we would love to have your 10-year-old cousins on and teach us how to get around our iPhones better. I mean, that's how I feel about it. So you're a Lee grad. So let's talk Lee for a minute. We're on the campus of Lee University. Yeah. We love it here. What benefit did your Christian college experience have in setting you up for where you are now?
Oh, man. I think that it is the community of Lee, truthfully, that really molded and shaped me. And like you said, it's the experience of people, person-to-person experiences, people from all types of background. It's not, I mean, I'm fourth generation Church of God, so I have that background, but you get to Lee and you have people from all sorts of different Christian backgrounds, and even some that non-Christian backgrounds now. That are on campus that you would assume, you're like, oh no, all of us know, not all of us are from a Christian context and didn't grow up in church. And so living with different types of people and these different experiences definitely have widened my perspective. And it's just honestly just an amazing community that Lee is, and everyone kind of has their groups that they can go and invest in and grow with. And so, yeah, definitely, I think it's the relational aspect of Lee.
Cool. I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you an off-script question. We got a few minutes left here. So you brought up sort of this aspect of non-Christians now coming to a Christian campus, which is awesome in my opinion. And I think a lot of it has to do not only with the quality of the education you can get at Lee, but a lot of the Christian universities in the country. There's still a very high level of academic sort of quality there, right? So there's that piece. But I've been here a year. I came from California, Huntington Beach area. I've been here a year. And this year at our administrators retreat, I was asked by Dr. Khan to give sort of a speech on what I see some of the greatest needs of Lee University are. And in my short time here, one of the things that I immediately noticed was a high need. The biggest need we have is an evangelism strategy. And what I mean by that is we have genuine non-believers who know nothing about Christianity coming on campus. That's one aspect. But we also have another aspect of a ton of students who are coming here with some kind of Christian background who genuinely don't have a Christian faith. They don't have a personal relationship with Christ. And so off the cuff, as the campus pastor of Lee University, if you were in my shoes, what would be your approach to an evangelism strategy for this campus?
Yeah, definitely. What I've noticed in terms of my 3 years there, we definitely saw the greatest impact come from peer-to-peer evangelism and discipleship. That is by far that will, in terms of the marking moments on our campus and of movements of the past. And obviously Pastor Jimmy was there when I was there.
Right.
He was there, and I'm not sure if he let you know kind of like the different ebbs and flows of movements, of student movements, organic student movements, where a student would just rise up and feel kind of the pulse of the campus and lead into something that was things that were not really over, had the umbrella of the university on it, but were blessed by the university to go forward. I believe that, the evangelism strategy has to go through a peer-to-peer. A majority of it. I would say a majority because I believe that there's still things that you could do in chapel.
Sure.
That could help that, but definitely empowering the peers, like we have the floor leaders, and the way that they share, and then let them take responsibility of that. And whenever a student, right, like for example, can I use myself as an example?
Of course. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was there for my last year. We did this event called One Body, and it was just birthed out of what we felt as students needed to happen, just a campus-wide prayer, that we come together, every single group, athletes, choirs, and even the political groups and then the Greek clubs, and just kind of everyone come together. Let's just pray, and let's just take, we prayed for like 7 hours on the SMC lawn, on a Sunday, where you would think no students would come. We had like 600 students come to pray with one another on the lawn, that needed that experience of Christ, and so many people that experienced God in that moment. And one thing that I saw, and maybe I'm speaking not necessarily to a strategy in the sense of what are the X, Y, and Z's, but something that to always be aware of is that God is always churning in the heart of a student for their year, or their generation, and that you will do what all the administration did for me. I mean, I had everything to my disposal. I was like, man, we would love to do this. And they're like, we got you a sound system. We've given you the SMC lawn. We're giving you like the space, voice, and power to go for it, like Pastor Jimmy did, Dr. Hayes did, Dr. Khan did. He pulled me into his office, prayed with me, empowered me. Like it was just an amazing thing. And so as long as there are not hurdles or obstacles to students to step out into what they're feeling needs to be a move of God on the campus. As long as you always have those avenues, that is your strategy.
That's good.
Channel avenues open for, we're a spirit-empowered campus. That's just what it is. For spirit-empowered young people to step up, as long as there are avenues for that, and your ear is open to hear what a student that is just gung-ho for a move of God, listen to them. I mean, Pastor Jimmy even really mentored us in that season. He mentored myself, my friend Brad LaChapelle, my friend Josh, my friend Taylor, like all four of us that were moving. He mentored us. He gave us history, background of like movements that happened and helped us along the way, but he was never closed off to wanting to see a move in the school. And so I believe that can happen year to year, semester to semester, but as long as the strategy is, hey, we'll move forward in making sure that we're catering to those that need a genuine experience, but there will always be an avenue open for a student that is empowered by the Holy Spirit and has a vision for their peers to be empowered to live out that calling. And you'll see great things, and we've seen them. And I mean, you can see what's happening now, even with what Noah's doing with the gathering that actually was birthed out of the well,
right?
Through Youth Salon. And that on the backside of one body, and one body on the backside of the tent. These are all things in convergence, and all of these different movements that are peer-led movements that just continue to manifest themselves. And so just being open to that, and I believe that that's one aspect of a strategy you can continue to implement.
That's incredible.
That's good. That's yeah. Like I hate to ask the next question because it's not as serious as that one, but we have one final question that we ask every guest on our podcast. Obviously, we've talked about Lee University and the fact that the good folks here open the studio to us, record this. What is the greatest lesson you learned in college that did not take place in the classroom?
The greatest lesson that I've learned, that I learned was that the classroom doesn't necessarily change who you are as a person, and you take who you are with you after your college experience. And so all of the relationships and habits, and whether or not you're choosing to be disciplined now, and your relationship with Jesus now, investing it into a church, investing it into a healthy community, all of that matters, because none of the head knowledge can really save you from who you are at the depth of who you are. And so all of the communities that I was plugged into, all of the mentorship that I received from the various teachers, professors, and pastors during my time there, truthfully, it molded me into the vessel that information, and revelation could pour out of, but without that molding outside of the classroom, and admitting to myself that, especially in that last year, I have one more year to get my disciplines and my act together and really get on point with my spirituality, and not just the educational point that I'm spiritual when I leave here. That was huge. And so I would tell anybody, the classroom is great, learning is great, but do not let that take precedent over your relationship with Jesus, because if you have a waning relationship with Jesus, it will not get fixed when you plug into a church after college. If you don't have that habit set now, and you're not investing yourself into Christ, when you get out, it is even harder, even if you're in a pastoral role when you get out. Because a pastoral role is a very lonely role. It's a hard role to keep yourself encouraged. It's a hard role. You're being gunned for from all angles. So if you're not grounded on the foundation that is Christ now, it is going to be a hard sell to leave, especially with all that head knowledge, into a space where you don't have the support systems that are at your disposal now at Lee. Because it is an amazing bubble, but it is a bubble. Real world outside, it is a hard place. And so ground yourself in a relationship with Jesus Christ outside of the classroom and watch him mold you into the vessel that you need to be outside.
Well, we said chapel, bro.
We just
we said chapel right there.
That's it.
That's good right there.
That's it.
Listen, Ellie, where can people stay connected with you at on social media and other places?
Yeah, so my social media handle on Instagram is What Is Ellie Doing? Ellie spelled like Eli's, because that's the truth. If you want to see what I'm doing, you'll jump on my Instagram to see what I'm doing. If you want to find me on Twitter, it's What Is Ellie Saying? If you want to know what I'm saying, there I am on Twitter. You can find me at What Is Ellie Saying? Our church is called Abundant Life, and on social media, we are ALCOGSA. That's Abundant Life Church of God San Antonio. So ALCOGSA. And you can find what we're doing on there, what we're trying to do for the city of San Antonio, and what we're trying to do in pushing Jesus to the rest of the world. Awesome. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. So anybody out there in San Antonio, go see Ellie. He's the English pastor of that church, correct, of Abundant Life. So if you're in the San Antonio area, please go see our boy Ellie. He's doing great things. You'll have a great encounter. And we are just so appreciative of your time and the encouragement you brought us and our listeners. Listen, I'm excited. Like, I want to go take on the world now. So, again, thanks for coming on the show. And as we always say, there's a seat for you at the table. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Collectives Code podcast. Would you do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review, and share this on social media so this content can reach other great leaders?